Welcome to SEC Football Live on a Monday. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, the Festivus for the rest of us, the airing of grievances, and the feats of strength. That is Stephen Godfrey. I am Braden Gall, brought to you by ML Rose, of course, here in Nashville. 6 great locations to drink beer and eat delicious burgers during Saturdays and Sundays while watching football. You're going to need that, Stephen, on Saturday. From the sounds of your household and mine, with no school for a long time, I think on Saturday we're going to need some time out of the house, away from family, away from the holidays. So ML Rose, 6 great locations across the mid-state area.
Did you know there's a bowl game on right now as we record this?
I have the turf on. I have Myrtle Beach is smiling.
I'm going to dip out of frame there for a second. I have a. It's just on like a default setting right now, like my TV in this room, and like I thought it was a replay, and it's actually like. There's football. Okay. I know we're college football professionals, at least legally, or like, right. The Bulls, the Bulls that are not the playoff are like, this keeps happening where I'm like, oh, that's a game. That's happening right now. Yeah. Well, it's like the 4th time it's happened to me.
As you and I have talked about on all the different platforms and together many, many years, they are made for TV reality events for people who make money off of them and to give us something to do. So that we do not have to talk about politics in our household. So
yeah, and I'm normally okay. Although, you know what, as people are probably listening to this or whenever you're receiving this, it is December 23rd. People do have the random relative in town, the people who like you do sort of want to stay within conversational bounds with, if you will. So that does make sense. Yeah, I guess so. So I approve of this incredibly bizarre time slot.
100%. ML Rose, of course, is where you should go when you need to get away from those fantastically amazing in-laws and relatives.
Go watch this bowl game. Go watch this bowl game right now. They're open.
It's funny. I have my brother-in-law from Florida and his son and his wife are in town. They're staying in our neighborhood, a little Airbnb, which is awesome, by the way, because it's great that we get to see them all the time. But the baby sleeps over there, which is great.
Yeah.
I got my other brother-in-law down in South Nashville. I got my sister and brother-in-law right here in East Nashville with us. So but we don't have to go anywhere and we don't have to have anybody over at our house overnight, which is amazing. We have one uncle thing we've got to go to. We've got to go to the one old generation sort of aunts and uncle gathering of all the cousins. And that's this evening. And we do that for like maybe a couple of hours. And I'm back on the couch watching the Packers tonight and I'm good to go. So we'll talk college football.
That's the dream.
SEC. We'll talk
if you hear me, I am not sick. This is the 440 Sports Network, and your buddy here went to his first Nashville Predators game of the season. I am the missing link on Saturday.
I was there with my kids and wife as well.
Oh, really? Yeah. So we like when
how much did you pay to get in,
bro? No, that's the problem. We did the opposite when the schedule came out. Stamkos signing, I'll make this fast. Okay. And we're like, well, we went last Christmas right before we left town to go see relatives. It was like on the 19th, maybe last year against Vancouver. And I have a family of 5. Everyone was really excited about doing that. It was like, so this year we're like, we're going to recreate this. Like we're going to go. So in August, we bought tickets. Do you know what Predators tickets were like in August?
You did the opposite of buy the dip.
I was an idiot.
You bought the peak.
I bought the Stamkos signing. And so anyway, I don't want to disclose how much we paid for 300 level tickets.
All right. Where were you? What section were you in? We were in 303. And I waited till about an hour and a half before the game started.
Something. Yeah, 3:0 something. Oh, wait. You like literally went in and scooped them.
I bought them for $24 a piece.
I did not.
Yeah.
I paid.
Sorry, dude. Sorry.
I paid a lot. I am a contributor to many contracts that maybe should not have been signed in this offseason. But I am hoarse. I'm hoarse because I don't cheer at college football games. I'm a member of the media. I don't cheer at anything else. When the overtime goal hit, I yelled with my sons, and I could feel a muscle in my throat pull when I yelled because I'm not used to doing that at sporting events, and I have sounded like I'm dying ever since. But it's blame hockey.
So not to add another crazy story onto this, but a couple of New Years ago, this is before I started working out again, before I started getting in shape and made some life changes that I needed to make. This is part of the impetus to all of my life changes, actually. It's the thing that you don't do a lot of, and then you do it after getting caught up in the moment. So we're all sitting around. There's about 6 families, and all of our kids are here on a New Year's Eve party. This is 2 years ago. 3 full years, 2 New Year's Eves ago. And we got into a conversation about how this is going to sound Al Bundy-ish, and I apologize, but I actually did run a faster 40 time than Tom Brady. Like I was a 4.78 guy coming out of high school. I had some small offers. Long story. We got to a discussion about how I thought like I could beat Tom Brady in a race, and like the other dads were like, I think we could too. And now he's lost all this weight, and Tom Brady's back to being fast again, and he's lost all this weight, and now he's running sub 5.40 flat because he ran like a 5.1 coming out of Michigan. And I was like, no, I was like, honey, I was trying to tell my wife, like, no, I actually have a timed with a stopwatch 40 time that is faster than Tom Brady. And all the wives are like, you guys are idiots. Go out in the street and race. This was after like 4 bottles of champagne, of course.
Yeah.
And the hamstring, just like your vocal cord.
Yeah.
Hamstring didn't make it through that race.
No.
Yeah. So anyway, all right.
I'm wounded today, but I promise I'm not dying of anything strange.
Tennessee Volunteers didn't make it through that race either.
No.
If you want to rate, review, subscribe on the podcast app, please do so. If you're watching live, please share, retweet, etc. Retweet is a big one there. For us, YouTube, thumbs up, notifications. Go to ML Rose. I know a bunch of you guys reached out to me and said, look, we're going to go this weekend, watch the games. We're going to pregame. They got 2-for-1 specials on Saturdays and Sundays. So for college football, pro football, great way to start your Saturday and Sunday. Fantastic Friday nights opportunities there. Great beer, great beer selection. And a great burger as well, and all kinds of great stuff. So go check out ML Rose. So I want to Texas is more interesting, so I want to talk about them in the current form. I think Tennessee is more interesting next year, but that's what I want to talk about first. I think I've done this on other shows already on the Athlon pod that I do with Stephen Lassen. I know you guys, everybody's talked about this. I'm already exhausted and bored with the internet conversation about trying to play revisionist history and relitigate who should or should not have gotten in. At the end of the day, I think all of that's a waste of time. I think at the end of the day, we had if you want to talk about structural changes to the playoff that we think could be better, that makes it better for everybody, then let's have that conversation. That's smart. Maybe reseeding, maybe top 4 seeds, totally predictable, should be seeded 1 through 4, whatever. 14 teams is probably going to expand. We can have those conversations, but I don't want to spend any time going back and being like, see, I told you so. This team shouldn't have gotten in, or this team should have gotten in, or that team shouldn't have gotten in. I just think it's such a waste of time. Everybody deserves.
They shook out. They shook out the way they did, and if you're still mad and you're an Alabama fan, you just saw what happened to Tennessee. It's like how much college basketball logic should we really apply? Because I spoke to a couple Tennessee fans this morning around Nashville, and you got a tough seed. Like you got a really tough 8-9 matchup.
You got a shit draw.
And honestly, if I could go back and think maybe I don't know if they would have won in Happy Valley. I'm not saying that necessarily, but I think it would have been a very different game. I think it would have been a very different game at the other 2 locations as well. Although I do really like the way Notre Dame's playing. But yeah, it's just you caught, and I'm going to test this out as a take. Okay.
Ooh.
The hottest team technically in college football by virtue of the embarrassment they gave them, sort of created for themselves. Like any one of those Ohio State drives to start the game, the scoring drives, would have changed the Michigan outcome instantly. And then Tennessee wouldn't have been playing them. They would have been playing someone else in the first round. So you got a bad draw.
And
it's
I think
everything's fine. I'm saying everything's fine for the future. You've got a bad draw.
Well, I disagree on the depth chart, but that's like a real football reason. Like it's not. I think Tennessee is actually of all the teams, Clemson. I think of all the teams that lost, I think Clemson is going to be the best team next year. I think they are the only one that I would. I think they're the only one I would pencil in as a playoff team. The other 3 I would not pencil in as playoff teams. I think Tennessee is losing so much veteran presence and leadership on both lines of scrimmage. And I think we're gonna look at Nico and we're gonna say, look, young quarterback. And this is the other thing. I went and double checked all this morning just to make sure I wasn't crazy. He was the least productive quarterback of the 12 quarterbacks in the regular season. Which is a stunning thing to say about a Josh Heupel offense. I agree with you. Long-term, big picture, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
It's more of a broad scope. And honestly, I'm so used to doing if I do radio here in Nashville or I talk to anyone who's connected to the Tennessee fan base, you're always still in that sort of really kid gloves kind of mentality of sky's not falling. It's not a death club anymore. The program's fine. Long-term trajectory, Tennessee's fine.
We don't need to snowplow parent the Tennessee football program. It's okay. It's okay.
I don't know. I'm your alma mater is still. I did feel the confidence going into last week that it was the first time I saw them genuinely enthusiastic, and now I feel
you didn't watch any college baseball this summer.
No, I try not to watch any college baseball.
We had a great year. Best athletic. We didn't talk about this, but it's the best athletic department right now in the game.
I know that's
the best.
I keep trying to tell Tennessee fans that, and I do think they're coming around and warming up to the idea of like this isn't 2009, it's not 2015, it's not 2017, it's not on and on. All
right, so I want to talk game. I want to talk the future. I want to talk Texas. I want to talk Georgia, Notre Dame. There's lots of stuff to get to. I think. The Ohio State thing, to your point about the draw, and this goes back to the blowouts. Look, college football playoffs, the 4-team era, the average semifinal score was a margin of victory was 17.9 points. The average margin of victory in the national championship game during that era was 18.6 points. It was 19.3 points over the weekend. It's not great. It's not good, but it's kind of just part of the game. I think one of your co-hosts, I think Alex Kirshner, had either he tweeted this or he said this on the show. I want to say he said roughly 35% of the games played in college football this year were played within a single score, which means 65% are not. And that's just the nature of the game when you have this much talent disparity across the sport, including in the playoff. But Ohio State, to your point, Ohio State, super, super talented, not just the angriest and hottest team, but also at home. And maybe the most talented roster in America, one of the top 2 or 3 worst case scenario. And so if you want to complain about something, I think it's about the seeding style and the structure of the playoff, not who got in, who didn't get in. Indiana, SMU, Tennessee, they all belonged in. That you cannot argue with the format. Like the format was the format. We can discuss how to make it better. And if you want to say, look, if you seed 1 through 12 the way the basketball tournament does, which is what I predictably had said was going to be a problem for 18 to 24 months now, then they're hosting Indiana in this round of a game, and that's a more comparable complaint and a more logical complaint than to say, SMU didn't belong in, Alabama shouldn't have got in, or Tennessee didn't belong in because they got beat by Ohio State. No, they ran into a buzzsaw because they got a bad draw, and that's it.
Yeah, the early word, and this is just what I'm about to say is conjecture, but it is conversation within sort of the sourcing community. There are 2 big sort of, let's call them grumps, coming out of the final pairing of 12. And that was the way the buys were, to whom a buy is delivered. All right. And then can we reseed after the first round? The problem right now, based on conversations and look, it's a 9-month off season. There's going to be a series of meetings. I do think the SEC and Big Ten are going to try and exercise their will in some direction here. You cannot nullify if we just reseeded, or sorry. If we just went kind of what you proposed, the major concern in Chicago and Birmingham is that we're going to essentially nullify those conference championships. Okay, because then you're going to end up having a potentially 1 through 4 on indeterminate ranking at the end. You could have the loser of the SEC championship get in with a bye, and that's something that that
would have happened this year.
SEC fans are like, oh, we want that. We want that. Let me tell you something. The Southeastern Conference secretly has a major problem on their hands, which is that revenue is going to continue to decline in conference championship weekend. But the second talking point here, reseeding after the first round, I think is way more on the docket, if you will, entering this offseason. Because with the exception of Arizona State and the Peach, everything aligns geographically. The SEC wanted Georgia and the Sugar because of the Atlanta fatigue that we talked about. And then everything else kind of slots logically, right? Like Oregon being in the Rose Bowl, et cetera, like Fiesta Bowl, even for Boise, that makes sense, right? Reseeding the opponent they receive, unless the Rose Bowl makes a ridiculous stink.
There you go.
Which is known to happen in this industry. That one has more legs because honestly, Braden, that's the easier one to just sort of snap into place.
It's very easy. And so here's the other one that I think I've gotten I cannot believe I'm optimistic about this, but because I talked to somebody very high up at a bowl game that is not the top tier, but is a second tier, right? Like a bowl game that in theory could grow into a neutral site location for a playoff game. And I was told that there is actual optimism, and what I was told is that it's more likely that we have more home sites than less moving forward, which is the first time I've ever seen anyone in a position of like any authority or any situation of inside the system acknowledge that the neutral sites, there's too many of them.
Yeah.
And so, which is always, again, to your point, the grumble coming out of the rankings, like I have been saying for almost 2 years that the seeding is part of the problem. Like seeding, moving teams from 16 and 12 and 11 and 10 up to 3 and 4 is a double reward. And Tennessee just unfortunately took it on the chin on this one because they had to play arguably the best team, maybe the best roster, maybe the angriest team in the country off 3 weeks of rest to prepare. It just is what it is, man. It sucks. Now, that does not excuse the performance by Tim Banks and the defensive staff for Tennessee, because it's one thing. Like Ohio State is loaded with NFL players. We said it last week on the show.
Yeah.
They just have a better guy at almost every position group than Tennessee does. They're just better. That's why I picked them to win. I don't think that's crazy thinking here. But it's one thing to scheme really well against NFL players and have your guys in position to make plays against NFL players. It's hard enough to beat those Ohio State skill players when you are schemed well and in position to make plays. It's even harder when you let Egbuka run through the seam down the middle of the field without a single player in the television frame, and then you drop a linebacker to try to cover him.
There were way more vintage Chip Kelly misdirection moments. Like
Chip Kelly
2009-esque in this game than I have seen since he got to Columbus.
He embarrassed.
And that's a compliment more to Ohio State than it is, I think, a criticism of Tennessee. This was, and I know this is an SEC show, but I'm telling you, there was a sort of snapping into place of reality and the talent level that you talked about and their execution. All of it became, to me, way more realized on the field against Tennessee than I have seen maybe since portions of the Oregon game. And it was like they were just asleep all season. It really was. Like it's weird to talk about. Like, what are they, Braden? They're the 8th seed, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
They very much could win the national title.
The best 4 teams at the beginning of the season, and this is based on Athlon rankings, my personal opinion, this show, whatever. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Georgia. Those are the best 4 teams in the country going into the season by most people, my opinion, and the Athlon. I thought at the end of the regular season, the best 4 teams in college football were Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Georgia. Who are the best 4 teams left in the tournament? Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Georgia. Those are the 4 best teams. And what we were trying to figure out, and what we're going to figure out about Penn State, Notre Dame, and Tennessee, which I've felt most of the year were the 3 best teams after that, is do those 3 belong on that tier? And while I think 42-17 is not an accurate depiction of what Tennessee was this year, or even Ohio State for that matter, sometimes things happen, right? And like Will Howard plays the best game of his life, and Tim Banks calls a terrible game. Chip Kelly's in his bag, and like all this stuff happens, and it can snowball. And you lose Dylan Sampson, you lose Squirrel Light, and all of a sudden it can get out of hand. But Tennessee was never on that top tier, and all we saw in this game, in my opinion, was a team that is clearly on that top tier at home, pissed off for greatness against the team that is not on that tier yet, and that is college football.
Yeah, and Tennessee was, at least on this show, they weren't described this way, but they were categorized as sort of the best of the second tier of the SEC. That was it. That was we had a competition going all season of, you had Alabama in there, they flamed out, and then there was this conversation around Tennessee, Missouri, Ole Miss, and then it ended up being sort of contention wise. And when it went down the stretch, it was Tennessee, Ole Miss, Alabama, A&M, roughly Missouri flaming out a little bit too. Like
Carolina snuck in there at the end.
Carolina came at the end, and I still think that's a fad pick. But
no, I think they're the bottom of that group. But
Tennessee was the one that got in by sort of just schedule default, and they lost fewer games, and that's fine. And they beat Alabama. All these things are fine and good. I have no problem with them being there. And they had a bad draw at the end. I don't necessarily think that Indiana speaks ill of the Big Ten. I don't think Tennessee speaks ill of the SEC.
Exactly.
I do think I am starting to believe that maybe the 3 best teams in college football that are left alive are not in the SEC.
You're Notre Dame. We're going to find out about Notre Dame.
Notre Dame definitely being the 3rd, but starting to really.
I think Texas and Georgia part 3 is equally as good as Oregon, Ohio State part 2. I think those 2 games would be.
In my perfect world, you would never see a 3-time matchup in a single season.
I agree.
And I definitely don't think Texas and Georgia will make that combination won't make it that far. But
I hope you're right.
I think it's Oregon. Unfortunately, I think number 1 and number 2 might be playing each other in the next round if you're to actually seed. So yeah, that's definitely a frustration. If you're an Oregon fan, it's definitely a frustration. Like, this is where reseeding, I think, is going to become a conversation way more than the meritocracy of the buys, because the bowls are still involved and they're a headache.
The reseeding doesn't help you as much, though, when Arizona State and Boise State or teams of that ilk, I'm going to say teams that were ranked like 9 and 12 get moved up to 3 and 4. The reseeding doesn't really help you very much in that situation. So it would help Oregon a tiny bit, but not much. I agree it would. So quickly here, because we've had some comments here on Notre Dame saying they lost. I guess QC says Notre Dame lost their defensive tackle Mills. That's a loss for them.
Very big.
We'll check that. But of course, Gunnar Stockton probably, it looks like we're going to start for Georgia. We'll get to Notre Dame and Georgia and why you're so high on them coming up in just a minute. However, Emil says we absolutely need home games in the quarterfinal. Totally agree.
If it was up to me, we'd have home games until the final.
I totally agree. The beauty of college football is the home campus sites. That's the pageantry. That's the charm. That's what it is. Even if you can't get all your luxury suites filled with corporate sponsors. Okay. GTFOH with that. Weird year for Nico. He says he missed some wide open throws that were pretty perplexing. I'm going to do something that no other SEC college football podcast is going to do. Okay. I think Tennessee Volunteers fans and Tennessee Titans fans have had a similar issue this year, which is that their quarterback has two problems: processing and accuracy. And for Nico, he is a freshman in college. That's the difference between Nico and Will Levis. Will Levis is in the professional ranks and it kind of is what he is at this point. Nico has a lot of time to develop and get better. He is super talented. He's very skilled. That Tennessee offense was just not what it's been in the past. The deep ball, not what it's been. The receiving core, not what it's been. All that compounds into the outcome we saw. I thought he was very tough on Saturday night. I thought he played a really physical game. Over 20 carries against that defense is impressive. He never quit, but wasn't very productive. My issue with Nico is I don't think he sees the field yet very well. And I don't think he misses on too many open throws because he's trying to fire the pigskin as hard as possible. And I think he just needs to make those subtle tweaks, and I think he'll be fine. My issue with Tennessee is that next year they are losing a lot of dudes over the age of 22. And that is a very veteran-laden football team on both lines of scrimmage. And they did not get after the quarterback against Will Howard. I think Tennessee's good next year, but I don't think they're a playoff team. And I think Nico's going to have to do a lot of carrying of the team. And I don't know if he's up to that just yet. I think there's a chance he might be back for a third year. I don't know. We'll see. Third year starting.
I'm kind of more of the opinion that prognostication right now has never been harder in the sport. And we also have not seen what the personnel cycle is actually going to sort of finish out. I mean, we still have
totally true.
A lot of portaling to do before we actually walk into August practice. And so I think there's a chance it will, it's I would say virtually impossible to argue down that level of veteran talent leaving. I'm not trying to render that a moot point. And I definitely think that right now Tennessee would be is worse for it. But I'm just really curious if the flattening out continues where we're is this are we talking about a sea of 9-3 teams next year in America's greatest football conference? Because I can see these holes developing across the board for 6-7 of these teams. I guess we can do postmortems if Georgia goes out.
What's funny is that I talked to some folks around the program before the season started, and a lot of them were saying, I think Tennessee is better this year than next year because of the holistic sort of view of the roster, because of how many veterans, the seniors, your middle linebacker is a guy who's married with a kid. It's just that kind of stuff. I agree. You don't know what the roster is going to look like for any of these teams, frankly, but that level of experience and veteran leadership is hard to just sort of even just portal. And so I think, I just think Nico had I think he had a really good situation to step into this year. You didn't have to be the guy that carried him to victory. He's going to have to be the guy, I think, next year to do that. So
next year you can't do the Oklahoma thing as often where you're just we're going to win this game on lines and running. And no, he's good. There's going to have to be a road moment for Nico next year. There's got to be a road moment for a lot of these quarterbacks who, dude, none of them finished in the top 10. I certainly don't care about the Heisman, but gosh, is that telling? That none of these quarterbacks finished in contention that way. I think Nico's maybe top of the list of a guy who's going to have to be the centerpiece next season for sure.
He just needs to
but I'm not blaming him for Saturday at the same time.
No, not at all. And I think you also again, I think he also has plenty of talent and ability and is in a very quarterback-friendly system that he could make a very big individual jump next year, and that is the reason Tennessee is very good next year. I just think there's lots of other stuff to overcome. What's ironic is that Clemson, of all the teams, that lost. I think Indiana and SMU are going to have a tricky time sort of rebuilding what they created this year. But Clemson, of all the teams, that Clemson returns, they return their top 3 receivers in Williams, Wesco, and Moore. They return Klubnik, who had 43 touchdowns this year, and he just came off his best game. Ironically, Clemson's defense is the problem, and the offense could be extremely good next year, which is totally fascinating.
They're portaling too.
Well, the two of them, 2 humans, came out of the portal for Dabo. It's crazy. It's crazy. So let's get to Texas then, because go to ML Rose, by the way, if you're in Middle Tennessee, if you're in Nashville, 6 great locations. Craft beer experts and burger experts as well. So Texas, you and I sort of like tried to talk our way through how Texas could stub its toe or trip up against Clemson or Arizona State. A lot of it's turnover based. Quinn Ewers. Mm-hmm. I do think we saw a formula from Texas. Defense sort of in the late third quarter, notwithstanding, giving up some chunk plays. I think Klubnik just played very well. And they, with 3 great receivers playing their best games of the season, sort of like Ohio State, I think some of that is how you explain defensive issues for Texas. But that being said, that's the formula. Quinn Ewers played a largely mistake-free game. The only interception wasn't on him. And they ran the ball for over almost 300 yards if you take away the sacks, including the big answer there from Blue with the 77-yarder. That is the formula for Texas to stay alive in this for a pretty long time. Now, does it work against Ohio State's front 7? Does it work against Oregon? Does it work against Georgia or Notre Dame? Who knows? Can it work against Arizona State? Absolutely. Very impressed with the way Texas handled that game and managed that game. They leaned on the one thing we knew Clemson couldn't do, which is stop the run, and they gashed them, and that was impressive, even with the injuries to the offensive line.
The running game is the thing I would be most confident about moving forward. The defense is the thing I would worry about the most. I thought some of the calls were a little perplexing. They could have absolutely stepped on their throat, and that's not something that Orangey and Slip. Texas still, to me, does not have the killer instinct that the Saban Reform School graduates all show. Like it's that Kirby mentality, even Lane to some degree. For like, if you want a scientific term in football sense, they dick around, as defensive coordinators like to say, and they called incredibly soft coverages. They called really, really soft coverages on the 2 touchdown drives that were consecutive for Clemson in the third quarter. Is that right? That brought them back in. It was 31-10, and then you sort of like, they kind of just willed themselves back into the conversation and made it a 1-possession game. Really, I don't want to take anything away from Klubnik, because I thought they were making great throws. I thought they have great receivers. Like yes. Check,
and a great tight end, one of the all-time leading tight end.
I know, yeah. When I said receivers, I would definitely including him. But it did see Texas went into a game management mode. They do this from time to time. Like they don't,
and they covered the spread, Steven.
They don't manage.
I say what you want, dude. They covered the spread.
Texas is not comfortable when they're dominant. I think they're more at home in those Georgia games that they lose. I think they're more at home against, the other thing is this.
That's an interesting theory.
They look more themselves series to series when they're in 1 possession up, down, like Kentucky's a good example of that game.
That would be the most Texas, what's the word I'm looking for? Like entitlement factor, where they just can't be focused unless they're in a real game.
I don't want to
but that's what they've removed from the program, is that entitlement.
That's what I was just saying. I don't want to lean back into that trope. And right. I think that this staff has done a tremendous job taking all of the bad Texas out of Texas, which was when no one thought Sark would be the guy who did that, et cetera. But then I was kind of shocked at how flat they seemed on defense with a lead. And a lot of that came in the calls and the coverages too. It's not so much from a play calling or effort perspective. I think it really was just, we're padding this thing. I'll give Clemson credit too, because there were enough adjustments going into those scoring drives to bring it back in. It was stuff that I thought calmed down a little bit. And I do think that is it fair to say that you think that Clemson was more talented than they had a chance to show this year? Because they get evaporated by Georgia, I think, before they knew what team they had. I will wave my hands away on week 1 and week 2. I know it's December, so it's weird to talk about that, but God knows we spent so much time investing in it.
Well,
that Clemson team that lost to Georgia, and then that Clemson team
totally different teams
gets off the mat and really starts cutting into Texas before Texas wakes back up. I was like, oh, okay, like him or not, that's a metric of what Dabo does over the course of 3 and 4 months.
So here's my issue with if we want to take that, the concern you're having about the Texas defense giving up a lot of those plays, the couple blown coverages, Klubnik took advantage. Again, I also would say that very impressive individual efforts by Williams, Wesco, Moore, the trio of receivers for Clemson, and the tight end. Klubnik played the best game of his life back in his home city, Westlake High School kid. The problem for the matchup with Arizona State, if you're elevating that concern, which I think is fair to do, the problem with Arizona State is Jordan Tyson is out right now, their top receiver. They do not have another receiver who caught more than 30 passes the entire season. They do not have the people. Now, Sam Levitt's a very good quarterback, over 30 total touchdowns, dual threat guy, physical leader, great toughness. Him and Scatterbo are fantastic in the backfield. Love the scheme and the system Arizona State runs. Big old tight end that's like 100 and, it's like 10 feet tall and like 400 pounds. Like they have some things that are very good. They are not the three weapons that Cade Klubnik was throwing the football to make the comeback. And that would be my question about concern about this game. Is it a concern about Oregon and the speed that they're going to put out in space? Is it a concern if you're trying to cover Jeremiah Smith and Ibuka and Henderson and Judkins? That's a concern. Absolutely. I don't think Arizona State has the pieces to make that type of.
You mash and you win the turnover battle. That's how Arizona State can win this. And if
Clemson couldn't run the ball though, so that's what I'm saying.
I know. Well, that's what I was about to say. Is it's like this defense is naturally talented enough up front to force you into you can't really be reductive. And I know and I don't want to gas up SEC fans, but ideologically Arizona State wants to do some of the stuff that a Kentucky run game would want to do, and you saw the result of that, right? At least this season. I don't necessarily think that's a calling card of Dillingham or that offensive staff. They're playing the hand they were dealt, which is we want to put Levitt in good, positive situations, and also we have this kid who's just risen up the ranks of college football in an amazing way. He's a dynamic talent. We're gonna ride him. I mean, you could say
he doesn't wear knee pads. He doesn't wear knee pads.
Ugh. It's the same as
what kind of moron carries the football that many times and doesn't wear knee pads?
When you're that age, you're invincible.
He had 37 catches, 263 rushing attempts. That is 300 times he touched the football and didn't wear knee pads. What kind of lunatic is this?
I'm being distracted. I love you. Momentarily distracted by what looks to be a completely unwatchable. What is this? The Myrtle Beach Bowl?
I was worried
they're at home. God.
Well, no, technically they're the road team. So the road team, Coastal Carolina, is getting defeated at home against UTSA in Myrtle Beach in the Myrtle Beach Bowl.
I hate the Bulls, QC. Man. Oh my God.
QC. Don't talk trash about me mentioning my alma mater. Okay, I went to Westlake High School. I'm allowed to mention Westlake High School on the show. So just
he's mentioning the fact that good God did they flog that thing during the.
No,
TV
I know.
Yeah,
but he's making fun of the fact that I said it, and then it's like, look, I'm different though because I went there. I went to that school. I'm allowed to say it.
I think QC's referencing the fact that ESPN will get a look hometown narrative, and then oh my God, they'll beat the crap out of it.
And it worked because he played his best game of his life. Anyway, I think I think there's a nice formula there that, and the thing we said about Clemson, the reason if you're making the case for Clemson to win that game was the blue chip ratio, the institutional experience, all these things that does not apply to as many teams left in this tournament as you think. It definitely applies to Ohio State. It definitely applies to House. I'm not sure where Oregon falls on this. I think it probably does count. Oregon, very talented, been here a few times, but they're not the same level of expectation as Ohio State over the years. So I think either of those two would be a terrible matchup, would be a tough matchup for Texas next round. But I think everything I saw in that game, Steven, confirmed my gut instinct that Texas could win the whole thing. So I'm not picking it, but
I do disagree with you on that. Yeah.
Okay. I told you I had this weird feeling they're going to finish the job this year, but I don't love the idea. Of course, Texas opens as a 14-point favorite over Arizona State. Penn State, I think, was an 11-point favorite. Ohio State, a couple points over Oregon, and Notre Dame, a couple of underdog points there against the Georgia Bulldogs. So I want to talk Notre Dame and Georgia and what they're getting. It does sound like Gunnar Stockton is going to start. Again, this is Monday morning, so December 23rd. We got a long way to go before that game takes place. So first of all,
this gap is weird.
It is very strange.
I get it. I don't want to debate it. It doesn't feel normal for a progressed bracket type
You could have played because they had a full 7 days. That you could have played on Saturday this weekend. Now it screws over your golfing buddies that run the Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl.
Well, no, it's just a total. It's that and a total fear of the NFL. That's why TNT got the games at that, is because ESPN didn't want to upset their contract with the NFL. I'd be really curious what those ratings are. By the way, they still haven't come out. It's kind of shocking to me. I have not received the big press release that I normally do.
I have not either. Now I'm going to do some Googling.
Because you had the Chiefs going against Penn State, and SMU, which was
the Ravens Steelers, which is a big time draw in the NFL as well.
And
I thought when I saw those two games,
the only reason they did those, right, was because they had to have those teams play on Saturday to give them the union required gap of rest for the Christmas games.
Yes.
So they're good. There were good NFL teams on purpose playing on Saturday so that they could gap out their practice schedules for the Christmas games
to make it a Sunday, Thursday instead. It's a Saturday, Wednesday. I thought for sure that they put those teams on Christmas Day, and I was like, oh, they're trying to fuck college football with these 4 teams, aren't they? And they're just. Kind of. That's
they were fucking the NBA still technically on this one, but they will also fuck college football because. I believe, yes, the Chiefs were on. I was in an airport watching the Egg Bowl on one television and a Chiefs game on the other on Black Friday. They don't care about college football.
This is on the artist formerly known as Twitter from John Olrand, of course, who's formerly of the Sports Business Journal.
He writes for Puck.
He's at Puck now. Steelers Ravens pulled a 7.6. Texans Chiefs pulled a 7.4. Tennessee Ohio State pulled a 6.3. Indiana Notre Dame on a Friday night pulled a 5.7. Clemson Texas pulled a 3.6. And SMU Penn State pulled a 3.1. TNT, obviously much lower from a rating standpoint, even though it was an entire ESPN broadcast. At one point, they even had like an ESPN stats stuff with logos on there. I was like,
oh, yeah. No, it's only a sub-licensing agreement.
Right,
they cannot apply any like play-by-play team or producer or anything to it. Very strange deal.
It's okay, though, because I don't think they've got the breadth of technology to broadcast games like that. Now,
TNT Sports in football hasn't existed in so long. Yeah, no, they couldn't staff up for just a handful of games.
Because the amount of technology, people don't realize, like the number of cameras, the crews, the truck. Like the reason CBS wins like 27 Emmys in a row is because they focus on one game and they put the best technology and the best people onto that broadcast.
And the most cameras.
And ESPN downsamples its broadcast. People don't realize this. It goes from like 1080p down to like 720, back up to 1080 before it goes to I actually talked to Craig Silver for about a 30-minute interview about a year and a half ago. He's the guy who's the executive producer of the CBS broadcast, and it is exclusively about their investment in technology and personnel.
Yeah,
they put more. There's a reason that Big Ten fans this year were all like, "Oh, I get it now."
Yeah,
I get it because the drone shots are cool and the camera work, and it's a beautiful broadcast.
The Saturday night ESPN broadcast used to have some of that pomp and circumstance. I remember like a lot of Clemson night games, and they're doing this sort of the hill run and all this kind of stuff, but. The CBS thing worked, and it's why I think it's one of the reasons why I just like the SEC's hubris in signing that overall deal with Disney. I think it'll be really interesting to see how that looks 5 or 6 years from now because CBS invests in those games in a way that no one else does. Dude, like I remember watching USC Notre Dame the last weekend of the regular season, and they're doing all these like basically high-tech drone shots coming over the Coliseum, and I'm like, oh, they used to do this at like Auburn. They used to do this at like Mississippi State, you know?
The Penn State USC broadcast from early in the year where they were doing the drone shots flying up over the side of the Coliseum, I was like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. And then my buddies, because we talk about this all the time, I joked about my Kirk Cincinnati t-shirt last week, I should say. And my Indiana buddy was like, he sent me a clip of like the intro when Indiana was hosting a game on CBS. I think they hosted one probably like 2/3 of the way through the season or like early November. He sent it to me, and it was like the fight song with the CBS drone flying over, Memorial Stadium with Brad Nessler talking, doing his intro, referencing, old coaches. And he was like, oh, okay, I understand now. I feel more emotion towards Indiana football in these 10 seconds than I have my entire life. And I'm like, yeah, this is why CBS is so good at what they do. And I say this as an ESPN employee. Their broadcast quality of the actual camera work and technology needs to get better. It needs to get better. It's the lowest of the 3 big ones.
Well, do like you just pick one, right? You just say this week it's going to be we're going whole hog on whatever it is this week, Tennessee, Georgia, and it's at 6:00 or 7, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And this is the one where we're gonna have all the cameras, all the drones, all the 4K stuff. I think that's the winning tactic, right? By the way, did you watch any of the Peacock games this year, or NBC primetime games?
Yeah,
they got a road to hoe.
I still think their one game is better. Like the Notre Dame game, because they put all that stuff into the Notre Dame game. I think Fox Fox has more 4K product than anybody else, but that's because they put it all into the big noon game, into the Gus game. Like their FS1 stuff on Friday and Saturdays is not very good. It's because ESPN is spread so thin; they have so many different games that it's hard to invest. Where CBS goes, no, we got one. We're going to do one, and we're going to crush it because we got great tech and great people. Anyway.
Or you can log on to ESPN Plus and watch a Sunbelt game that's technically on the ESPN family networks, and it is literally one camera attached to like the press box terrace, and it like keeps vibrating the entire time. And you got some poor guy who's 23 years old trying to do play-by-play. Oh man,
the play-by-play guy is swiveling.
Dude, some of those Plus broadcasts are rough.
Yeah. We got lots of friends that are doing those broadcasts.
Oh, I did. No doubt. Yeah, not throwing any shade there at all.
All right, Notre Dame. Riley Leonard set the record for rushing touchdowns by a quarterback for Notre Dame. 15 rushing touchdowns. They played with their food a little bit after getting up big, 20-3 on Indiana. You have been on this Notre Dame team against Georgia for quite some time. A lot of folks out there are with you on this. That the very trendy hipster upset pick is to take Notre Dame before they beat Indiana to beat Georgia. Point spread comes out. They're only like a 1-point underdog against Georgia. Now it seems like Gunnar Stockton might not play. So here's my question. And you alluded to this last week. I think it was on our show where you said, Brian Kelly thought it was Notre Dame's problem because he wanted to fish in a bigger pond. He leaves to go to the SEC, to go to LSU, to fish in a bigger pond. Hasn't quite realized that potential. Marcus Freeman says, no, it's not Notre Dame. It's you. I'm going to do better. Now, I don't think that applies to the 9th-year linebacker who's starting at middle linebacker, or Riley Leonard. It doesn't apply to him. But the talent that was on display against Indiana, the young guys, the Loves and the Youngs, and some of those pieces that are young, freshmen and sophomores, those are Marcus Freeman recruits. Are you seeing the talent that they need to put on display to beat a team like Georgia? Because this is the definition of what we're talking about. This is the game that Brian Kelly says he couldn't win at Notre Dame because of players.
Yeah, this is it.
This is not the best Georgia team that Kirby Smart's had, but still very hard to beat. What do we need to know about the matchup? And how many total points are going to be scored?
I don't want to hear. Look, if Notre Dame wins this game, I don't want to hear like, oh, well, this wasn't the ideal Georgia team, because the blanket narrative across Feinbaum and all that stuff has been that Notre Dame is a secondary brand, and it is not possible to play defensive and offensive line and recruit talent and have like. We all heard it. We now have a head coach in the SEC who's saying it specifically about Notre Dame, even when he's not saying it. And you can see where LSU's at. You can see where the Irish are at. That's it. That's all.
Notre Dame's schedule had something to do with that this year. But your point is valid. Point is valid.
I'm not that guy. That's the same complaint. No, that literally is that comment. It is that comment. It's the same comment about like, Indiana didn't belong in the playoff, but no one's going to mention the fact Tennessee got its ass beat.
I did not say Notre Dame didn't belong in the playoff. I'm saying Notre Dame played.
The schedule helped,
and their loss to Northern Illinois wasn't great, but
I mean
it doesn't mean they're going to lose to Georgia.
That's awesome, yeah. I mean, like, there's a lot of teams in the playoff with bad losses. A lot. So
I don't know what you're talking about. Texas's only 2 losses are to Georgia. Ohio State's only losses to Oregon and to Michigan.
Who'd Tennessee lose to?
Georgia's 2 losses are to 2 road teams that were like basically playoff teams.
Who did Tennessee lose to?
Tennessee lost to Georgia on the road, and then a bad average Arkansas team, which is still way better than Northern Illinois. So 1 bad loss. I mean, Arizona State's losses are probably worse, right? Texas Tech and what was the other one?
That was the Cincinnati loss was personnel based entirely because they didn't have the quarterback. There's somebody else at Arizona State didn't have.
My point is there's not a lot of bad losses in this playoff. These are
Tennessee had a bad loss going in. It was Arkansas. What the SEC does is justifies its lower end losses by saying, oh, it's so competitive in this league. But the reality is like good teams lost to shitty ones down the stretch, and that's it. It's a very easy.
Okay. Don't make this an SEC thing. I'm saying all of these games are explainable losses. Like
no.
losing to Texas Tech is not a bad loss.
We're talking about Notre Dame. We're talking about going down their schedule. So they got help from their schedule.
Losing at home to Northern Illinois is way worse.
That's not a help, though.
Is
what
way
help
worse.
Did they get in their schedule?
Losing to Northern Illinois at home is way worse than losing to Texas Tech.
Right. But you said they got help
or Arkansas on the road. Their schedule sets up to where they only rank teams they played. They played 2 ranked teams after week 1, and they were G5 teams, which are very good teams, but they put them in their place pretty easily. This is a very good Notre Dame team. They're not going to lose or beat Georgia because of their schedule. I'm just saying, comparing one schedule, Oregon's schedule is far more difficult. You know what I'm saying? Like it's okay to just say, look, Indiana still belongs in the tournament, but didn't really get tested. And the 3 times they got tested, Michigan, Ohio State, and Notre Dame, they got beat on the line of scrimmage.
The one thing I would worry about for Notre Dame is that they lost the D lineman in Indiana, and they also sent off, like, I think there's 3 or 4 other guys. There was an offensive lineman.
Got banged up.
There's it was a linebacker. I was looking through the injury report that they put out. Like, there's 3 or 4 starters that are, if you go offensive line plus linebacker plus D line, I'm looking now that are questionable going into this, and that's how they've won games. Okay, that's how they've won games.
I think Riley Leonard,
including against the SEC.
Leonard is
on the road against the SEC.
Well, that's the game plan. They lined up, and eventually those 3- and 4-yard plays in the first half against A&M turned into 5, 6, and then 12 and 15-yard plays on the ground, and they bullied A&M in the second half, which is how they have to beat Georgia. I'm curious, like, they've got a really good staff. They got a lot of talent. Riley Leonard's a great player. Denbrock's a really good coach. Like, they definitely sat on it, though, against Indiana, sort of similarly, and I'm not sure why. Like, I think they have already said out loud they're hiding stuff.
Yeah. That's why. That's why. Honestly, I think as soon as that bracket came out, they knew that they could out talent Indiana, and they did. And they were not playing aces when 6s would do. I think that's but fair. Like 3.5 quarters of that game, it's a complete blowout. And I think they did that again, similar to Texas, although Texas did it way earlier in the game, I think. And Notre Dame did it more as it was a moot point. I'll put it this way. It'll be like a bar trivia question in a couple years, what that final score was for Notre Dame, Indiana, because the majority of the nation was basically like, okay, I'm going to bed. They've scored 3 points, you know?
Yeah, it was, I think this is Notre Dame's best shot in this situation in quite some time. I think they match up better. I think they're more talented. I think they're playing. Georgia has flaws. Like, I think this is one of their best opportunities in this situation in quite some time. And the problem is they still have 2 more to go after this. So even Notre Dame could finally break through, finally win one of these games that it is a national championship caliber game. Let's be very honest. There are 2 national championship games happening right this next round. Oregon and Ohio State is a national championship game. For all intents and purposes. And I would say Notre Dame, Georgia is on the same kind of level. And we're going to find out, like we found out with Tennessee, does Notre Dame belong on the top tier? Does Penn State belong on the top tier? We're going to find that out, and Georgia's going to give us the answer over the next two games or 1 game. Who knows?
Look, I don't want to be super sports radio reductive, but who's your quarterback? It's going to come down to quarterback play. Like, is the kid's elbow okay or not? Because that's going to color the entire situation. I also think there's a lot of gamesmanship on Georgia's part, as there should be, by the way.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question then, because we've been like team Georgia no evolve offense. I'm curious, does having Gunnar Stockton and giving Kirby and these guys, like, let me rephrase that.
Okay.
Does Kirby's like instinctual pull towards conservative offense? I'm just going to say it like that. He is instinctually pulled towards being conservative and sort of playing it safe and letting the defense do the work, et cetera, however you want to explain it. Does that actually now help them in this situation where they have to probably break in somebody who's been in the program a long time, knows the system, knows the offense, pretty decent athlete, but just not the guy? Does it help that that's how they like to play naturally when trying to play against a Notre Dame team that's also probably going to play a little bit like that as well when you're looking at a 13-12 game? Doesn't it help them?
It helps them in so much as long as they can still keep the bulk of the run game with a certain sort of amount of coverage integrity from Notre Dame. So they could be I'm not trying to raise the ghosts of earlier this season and people getting mad at us for what we said about Georgia's offense, but talk about McConkey or any of those guys that they don't have anymore. They could be that reductive because the moment you started to lean in on their sort of cheat mode run game, they could hit you over the top. Now what's interesting to me is, so let's just say Stockton comes out there because that's what they have to do. All right. That elbow is not functioning and we are not, that's it.
I'm expecting that, right? I'm expecting Stockton to have to be the guy.
Dude, I don't know. I mean, I really
they're going to shoot him. If you can't shoot up Dylan Sampson's hamstring, you can't shoot up Carson Beck's elbow.
Not like from the amount of reading I've done, just like about that, what they think that injury is, because obviously they don't have to disclose anything. This is like hockey where it's like upper body, lower body.
Right.
I think that if it's Stockton out, they have to be able to be confident in him only to the degree in which they can push backers off and safeties off. If he is pure game manager, so it's weird because I don't know if it's a question of like they're always reductive, they're always simplistic, and that could work in their favor. I will say this: they have a lot in the book ready to go because they are not a quarterback deep ball reliant sort of system. At some point, Notre Dame is going to press you into like, all right, you're going to find 3rd and past 6 at some point. You're going to.
Yep. I was just looking up the numbers while you were talking.
Short field passing.
170 combined receptions in the NFL for McConkey and Bowers this year. Everyone's talking about Malik Neighbors breaking the rookie reception record. Brock Bowers already has. I think he's close. He's 1 reception away. I think he's got 101 catches. They have over 200. They have over 230 targets, Stephen, between the two of them. McConkey and Bowers.
Brock Bowers doing that? He's in Vegas.
101 catches for 1,067 yards.
Like that's Aiden O'Connell and Desmond Ridder, and like that's like the worst quarterback room in the league. That's insane.
Oh man, but like I think it speaks to, like I think a lot of us in the summertime were saying, look, what's the question around Georgia? It is taking away the 2 most dependable pieces on the football team, Bowers and McConkey, which allowed Carson Beck to get out of so many issues. To your point, the 3rd and 6, the 3rd and 8, the 3rd and 11. Those guys were automatic.
Yeah.
And it's not like automatic for college. They are automatic in the NFL already in 1 year. And that is how good those guys were. And I think we underestimated.
I guess devil's advocate is like, all right, well, you lost that. You're sure as hell not going to be riskier in your pass structure. Right?
Okay, so Puka set the record last year, 105 catches. Jalen Waddle, 104 as a rookie. Bolden, 101. So he's 4 catches away, Brock Bowers, from setting the rookie record.
Yeah.
So there you go. All right. Just wanted to make sure I got that right. So he'll do it next weekend. Look, I don't want to say that I'm rooting for Notre Dame because I think it would be a better story, and I don't want to see Georgia in the national championship game just because it's boring. But I have to see it to believe it, Stephen. I hope it's this time. We do this all the time with the Big Ten and the SEC. And sometimes it's against USC. It's not against the SEC. Sometimes it's just against Miami or whatever. Ohio State, no, too, right? Breaks through and sort of quiets the doubters. You get, it takes years and years and years. And then Urban Meyer breaks through in 2014 and shuts up Nick Saban in Alabama in 2014. And then years and years and years and years of doubting Jim Harbaugh. And then he breaks through and he shuts down and shuts everybody up by winning a national championship. I'm curious if Notre Dame can now join that group because Penn State has the opportunity to do it as well. And I'm curious to see if Notre Dame can kind of end it's not just 15 or 20 years of this narrative. Wow. It's 30 years of this narrative.
We've gone the entire show without talking about the team who I think is actually going to do that. I think it's going to be Oregon.
It's going to break through and win the national championship.
Yeah.
That's the team to root for. But
there's so many similarities with Oregon and Notre Dame. I think and I've mentioned this on the show before, but we're really about to see it going into this holiday quarter semi, whatever the hell we're calling this thing. Because they are better inside than they ever have been. They are better on lines than they ever have been. They're recruited and developed just in a way that's completely different. It's just not what it's not the, in Oregon's case, we're going to be light in the ass and we're going to be the fastest team in college football. That works until it absolutely doesn't. which is what happened to them in really more the second title game that they played in against that Ohio State team that you mentioned. And then for Notre Dame, it's just, I think it's a quality of player on the front seven and a quality of skill position player. And I would say right now, more the front seven than the skill position players in terms of just this year for Notre Dame. But they too have, I would say, vastly improved on what's the best.
They're the inverse of Oregon. It's all year for many years. They've been nothing but line of scrimmage, not enough speed and athleticism. Now they've got an elite all-American safety. Missing their corners is a big problem. But they've got great running backs and a great quarterback who are very talented and skilled in space. The question is the other weapons. There's not a lot of Golden Tates and Kyle Rudolphs, and like they don't have the outside weaponry. They're kind of similar to Georgia in that sense, which is why I think this is going to be like 14-13. But like they don't have the pieces the way Oregon is more complete, and I think that's maybe your point about.
Juicy Hawk asked how many NFL teams are going to hand Lanning a blank check if they win.
NFL.
Yeah, that's it. So that's been a really popular conversation. There was a report initially in October that hit, and I think it was after the Ohio State win, where it was like, oh, here they come. Lanning's going to have to, and that's when I said here they come, it's more about the fact that like anytime Oregon experiences a minor amount of success,
it's predictable.
But it's like, oh, the coach is out. The coach is out. Like, and then the problem is they've had a run of that with Chip Kelly having NFL aspirations, but then also both Willie Taggart and Mario Cristobal going back to sort of like childhood programs, or I mean, Cristobal's case is alma mater. So I don't necessarily think that you take an NFL job if it's offered to you right now. I would if I was Dan Lanning, but I also could see him re-signing a pretty long-term deal there and not going to another college team unless it was properly like Alabama or Ohio State.
Yeah. No, so. I think, LSU might be intriguing to him down the road, but honestly, what matters.
Yeah.
What I say to people all the time is like, what do you dream about when you put your head down at night? And this is what I always said about Harbaugh. Harbaugh only dreamed about two things his entire life: winning a Super Bowl, number one, and returning Michigan to the national championship. Those are the only two things he cares about.
Right.
And he's done one of them, and he almost did the other. And so now what he's gonna do? He's gonna go back. Like, he puts his head down at night and he dreams about the Lombardi Trophy. And so if Dan Lanning puts his head down at night and he dreams about winning a Super Bowl, you cannot do that at Oregon or Alabama or Ohio State. You got to go try your hand in the NFL. If he loves and he's a college guy and dreams about the college national championship, well, then he's in the right place, and he might have a great chance to do it this year.
No, he's can win the
guy.
So. They could build a dynasty at Oregon. That's the difference now.
Yep, I agree. All right. Anything? How about Prabula going to Missouri? I don't know what that means for Missouri next year, replacing Brady Cook, Luther Burden. But I do find it interesting that Devin Brown, the Ohio State quarterback, is in the portal and taking snaps for Ohio State, and Bo Prabula was not. I just think that's interesting.
You'd have to ask Missouri about that.
You think Missouri was the driving force on that? You have to leave.
No, I think you have to. No, the kids have to open up their maximum market value, and a lot of schools are going to say, "Hey, we want you right now." And no one's going to be honest in that situation. And blaming the kid, I think, is total bullshit.
Let me be super cynical for a second and see what you think about this.
All right.
If you are Steve Sarkisian or Kirby Smart, I suppose James Franklin or Dan Lanning, why not get Devin Brown on your team right now? Why not offer him the scholarship, bring him in for weeks of scouting against Ohio State? That's the most cynical thing I can think of.
I don't know how much it would matter, honestly. I don't like it would be more a tell on you if you felt like it was necessary to do that.
Well, but he's not a worthless person. Like, he's a good player who could be a quarterback for you.
In this phase, I don't know. I'll ask her. That's a weird situation. I'll ask around about.
It's very cynical to be like, okay, these coaches look for every possible. Like, they won't even tell you who's starting until week 1 of the season because they think they have some sort of competitive advantage.
Sure,
so don't tell me they're not thinking through every possible angle. And if you're Steve Sarkisian, now it's different for them because they've got Arch lined up for next year. But if you're Georgia and you're like, we're going to have an open competition next year, Devin Brown's a talented player who could help our team. And oh, by the way, we think we're going to play Ohio State in the national championship game. After they let's say Ohio State beats Oregon and Georgia beats Notre Dame. You got 4 weeks of Devin Brown in your program to help prepare you for Ohio State.
I don't know if he shows up on day one with a playbook, though.
No, but just I'm just saying,
there's nothing stopping that either.
If there's no stopping it, is really my point. Like, it's just there. It's just available. It's like a Saudi it's like a Saudi wealth fund putting $2 billion into the president's son-in-law's account. It's just there's not illegal. It's not nothing. Nobody's stopping it. But
and on that note,
we all know what's going on. So
and on that note,
I don't know. It could be very cynical. It could be very cynical for Kirby to be like, "Hey, Devin, you want to come compete for a starting job?" Yeah, but like, how should we block Jack Sawyer?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Just saying. All right. Sounds like you're done.
No. I'm sorry. I'm getting texts about coaching. So yes,
all right. Go do your job. Go do your job. Go hang out with family. Go to ML Rose, of course, if you need to get out of the house and your kids need to go get some burgers and fries.
Go watch that bowl. Yeah, go watch that bowl game in silence.
Watch the bowl game. It's great.
That's your right as an American.
Obviously, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, the Happy Kwanzaa, the Festivus for the rest of us. We do appreciate all you guys for hanging out. All you guys in the comments are great. Thumbs up on the YouTube page, notifications, etc. Have a great one, everybody. That's it. It was a great first round. I know the scores weren't what you wanted, but we're underway here. The home field advantages were the star of the show, and I'll leave you with this. I'm so glad that we got those 4 stadiums hosting those games. Can't wait for more in the future because that is what makes college football special and great and charming. And it's seeing all those fans getting to celebrate those kinds of things. So there you go. Check out Godfrey all over the internet. You can read him, listen to him, follow him, interact with him all over the internet as well. You can get to me at Braden Gall on Blue Sky or Twitter or whatever the hell you use these days. Otherwise, Merry Christmas, everybody. For Steven, I'm Braden. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.